Hi everyone. So as we are starting a new chapter, chapter 5, which by the way we are temporarily skipping chapter 4. We'll come back to it later in the year, but we are beginning chapter 5 now. I want to pause because we are starting to get close to the end of the 9 weeks and talk to you about how that's going to work. So usually in this class, we give a cumulative 9 weeks exam that covers everything from chapters 1, 2, 3, and 5. Because of, partly because of my maternity leave and partly because the 9 weeks or the marking period this year is a little bit shorter than normal, we're not going to have time to do a cumulative exam for the first 9 weeks. So that will have to wait until your midterm. From here on out, and actually this has been true for a while, these videos that you're seeing were made during my maternity leave 2 years ago with my daughter. And so you may see a reminder here and there in the chapter 5 videos about your 9 weeks exam and what to expect and things like that. Please just disregard that. I really don't have the time to remake all of those videos and edit out those incorrect dates and things like that. But I'm telling you right now for certain, you are not taking a first 9 weeks exam. If you're unsure about that, ask the substitute teacher or go ask Ms. Zufli, but we are not doing a 9 weeks exam. However, I am still giving you the opportunity to do an optional study guide to sort of review everything that you've learned this 9 weeks and also give you a little bit of grade forgiveness. So if you complete it completely, 100%, I will give you a 50 out of 50 test grade. If you choose not to complete it, then it neither harms nor helps you. Okay, so this is your call. If you think your grade could use a boost, then by all means do it, and you'll get a 50 out of 50 as long as it is complete. You cannot leave anything blank. It's a good review. I recommend everybody at least take a look through it and solve some of the problems. Even if your grade is really good right now, it's a good review. But if you want to get this 50 out of 50 test grade, you have to answer every single question. It's due on Thursday, October 22nd. Okay, that is the last day of school for you for this 9 weeks. And it needs to be turned in on that day. I cannot take them late because grades are pretty much due that day. So I'm being pretty generous by accepting it that late. It needs to be turned in on Thursday, October 22nd, okay? It covers material from chapters 1, 2, 3, and 5, and that will be distributed today in class. You can go ahead and distribute that now, or you can wait until the end of the period if you like, but that is going home today. If you have any questions about that, you can go ask Ms. Zufli, and I do hope that some of you take advantage of this opportunity. Hi everybody. Today we are going to start chapter 5. You may have noticed that we are skipping chapter 4. We are going to come back to it later. That's just not something that I wanted to cover while I was out. So we're going to temporarily skip it and come back to it. In starting chapter 5, we are moving into the second big chunk of this class. If you remember at the very beginning of the year, I told you that AP Statistics is broken into 4 chunks. The first is describing data. The second is experimental design. The third is probability. And the fourth is inference. Since we are done with chapters 1 through 3, we are essentially done with that first big chunk of the course, describing data, which means now we're going to be moving into the second chunk, which is experimental design. And actually, that entire chunk of the course is contained within chapter 5. This is it, okay? This chapter is going to feel really different from a lot of what we've done so far because this chapter doesn't have any math in it, okay? So this is going to be lots of vocabulary and lots of concepts. I highly recommend that you make flashcards or a vocab list or something like that so that you can really internalize this vocabulary, because you really need to be able to use it properly. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started with Chapter 5, which, like I said, is all about experimental design and sample surveys. When we have a question of interest, okay, if we are posing a question to be answered with statistics, there are various ways for us to attempt to answer it. And these include observational studies and they include experiments. I want you to think, just based on what these are called, what is the difference between an observational study and an experiment? Go ahead and pause the video and talk with your partner, talk with your elbow buddy about what you think the difference is between observational studies and experiments. Okay, in an observational study, it's what it sounds like. We just observe individuals and we measure variables of interest. We observe and we measure. We do not attempt to influence the responses. We don't get our hands dirty. We just see what happens anyway. In an experiment, the important thing is that we impose a treatment on individuals and we observe their responses. Okay, so we're not seeing what happens anyway. We assign certain individuals to receive one treatment and certain individuals to receive another treatment, and then we observe the responses. So in an observational study, we see what happens anyway. In an experiment, we impose a treatment. We also have surveys. They don't really fall into either category. You know what a survey is. It's, you have a list of questions that you answer and then you kind of gather data that way. We'll talk about surveys a little bit, but this chapter is mostly going to focus on observational studies and experiments. We're going to start with sampling techniques. That's what we're going to mostly talk about today. These are ways of gathering a sample of individuals so that you can survey them. We do this because it is often inefficient, or maybe it's even impossible, to gather information about the entire group. We call the entire group the population. That is the entire group that I want to answer the question about. If we did attempt to contact everyone in the population, we would be conducting a census, okay? These bold words are the vocab words, in case you didn't catch that. So we have survey, we have population, and we have census, okay? In the U.S., they conduct a census every 10 years. And one of the reasons they only do it every 10 years is because it's incredibly expensive. It's incredibly, it takes a lot of time, okay? They have to employ a lot of people to deliver the census and to tabulate the results and things like that. And so a census is not typically an efficient thing to do. It's expensive, it's time-consuming, etc. So instead, we use a sample. We take part of the population and examine that. Okay, so we study part of the population in order to try to gather information about the whole. I look at a subset of the population and try to extend my conclusions to the entire population, and that is a sample. The sample is the part of the population that we actually study. If we want our conclusions to be valid and accurate for the population, we need to choose our sample very carefully. The way that we choose our sample is called the sampling method, and we're going to learn about a few different sampling methods that are often used. Some are better than others. The first is called a voluntary response sample. This is when somebody chooses to be part of the sample by responding to some type of an appeal, like a call-in poll or an online poll. With this, I think of, when you go on Yahoo and maybe it has a little click it poll on the left side of the screen that says, do you agree with the president's decision about such and such, and you click yes or no. You are participating as part of a voluntary response sample, okay? You have chosen to participate. You could just as easily have not participated. Voluntary response samples often produce biased results. The reason for this is you really don't participate unless you feel strongly about the issue, okay? So, if you kind of feel ambivalent about something, you're not going to go out of your way to participate. You're going to participate if you feel really, really strongly about an issue. So we're only going to get those extremes, whereas the people with kind of middle of the road opinions are going to be really underrepresented in this type of sample, which gives me misleading results. The second type of sample is a convenience sample. This is when the people who are actually selecting the sample choose the individuals who are the easiest to reach. Have you ever been to the mall and somebody comes up to you with a clipboard and asks you to participate in their survey? If so, you were chosen as part of a convenience sample. They choose the people that are easiest to reach. There's a section of the University of Florida campus called Turlington Plaza where pretty much everybody has to pass through that part of campus at some point during the day. And a lot of times, companies that are administering surveys will go to that part of campus and pass out the survey to the people who pass by that section of campus because it's easy to reach a whole lot of people all at once. Okay. My question is, why could this be faulty? Go ahead and discuss that with your partner or with somebody sitting next to you. So pause and discuss. Okay, so one of the issues I could think of with convenience sampling is that the location where you are choosing your sample may influence the results that you're getting. With the example I gave with the University of Florida campus, if that's where you're delivering your sample, you're only getting college students, okay? College students alone may not be representative of your population. Now, if your population is college students, then maybe you'll get an okay sample. But if your population is just Gainesville residents, then all you're getting is UF students, and that's not going to be representative. If you are delivering a survey about people's opinions about fast food, and you're choosing a convenience sample out in front of a McDonald's, you're going to get a certain set of responses that aren't going to be representative of the overall population. So a convenience sample is really not great either. These are both flawed sampling methods. So both of these methods display bias, and I've used that word. What it means is a systematic favoring of certain outcomes. A certain outcome is favored over others because of the way I designed it. Okay, if I'm giving a survey about people's opinions towards fast food and I'm doing it in front of a McDonald's, I'm going to get more people who like fast food than if I had delivered this survey in front of a gym or something like that, right? So my question is, how do we avoid bias? Bias is not a good thing. Well, we take personal choice out of the equation. Instead, we prepare a list of the entire population and we allow chance to do the choosing for us, okay? We let people get chosen by chance rather than by personal choice. By the way, that list of the population is called a frame or a sampling frame. So I list out the entire population, which is not easy to do, and I find a way to randomly select individuals to be part of my sample. All right, I want to give you a few examples that illustrate the dangers of some of these sampling methods. So I want you to go ahead and distribute the Chapter 5 homework packet. That should be in the room somewhere. So everybody needs a Chapter 5 homework packet. And I want you to turn to page 334 and look at question 7 and question 8 and discuss those with somebody sitting next to you. So you're going to distribute the homework packets. You're going to discuss question 7 and question 8. Pause. Okay, so question 7 says, a newspaper advertisement for USA Today, the television show, once said, should handgun control be tougher? You call the shots in a special call-in poll tonight. If yes, call this number. If no, call that number. The charge is 50 cents for the first minute. Explain why this opinion poll is almost certainly biased. I'm hoping we talked about the fact that, first of all, this is a voluntary response sample. Okay, so 7 is voluntary response, which is not what the question is asking. It's saying, why would it be biased? Are you going to pay 50 cents to call in and say, I'm not really sure how I feel about handgun control. I could see why restrictions should be tighter, but I could also see why people should have the freedom to bear arms. So I'm not really sure how I feel about this. Of course not. You're only going to call if you have an extreme opinion, probably in one direction or the other. So only people with strong opinions will participate. That's going to make it seem like the population has very strong, albeit split views about handgun control. Whereas there are plenty of people who see both sides of the issue and kind of have a more moderate view, like a middle-of-the-road view. However, we're not going to see that from this voluntary response sample. Okay, so hopefully you and your partner talked about something to do with that. I especially take issue with the fact that they're charging to call. You're really not going to call unless you are willing to pay to have your opinion heard. All right, let's look at number 8. It says, you are on the staff of a member of Congress who is considering a bill that would provide government-sponsored insurance for nursing home care. You report that 1,128 letters have been received on the issue, of which 871 oppose the legislation. I'm surprised that most of my constituents oppose the bill. I thought it would be quite popular, says the Congresswoman. Are you convinced the majority of voters oppose the bill? How would you explain the statistical issue to the Congresswoman? So again, we have a voluntary response sample. People are choosing to be part of her sample by writing her a letter. Now here's the thing. Do you write a letter to your congressperson to say, hey, good job, lady. I agree with you. I am in favor of this legislation. Or do you write a letter when you are upset and you disagree with a decision and you want somebody to change their mind? I think there are plenty of people who write those positive letters, but I think there are way more people who write a letter when they get fired up against an issue. So we're really only getting the negative responses, whereas maybe the majority of her constituents do agree with that legislation. So you can see in both cases that by gathering a voluntary response sample, we're introducing bias into our results because we're getting results that are not necessarily representative of the overall population. So the way to fix this is with something called a simple random sample. This is what we like, okay? A simple random sample, the actual definition is that it consists of a certain number of individuals from the population chosen in such a way that every set of that number of individuals has an equal chance to be the sample actually selected. What that means is if I want a sample of 100 people from the population, I have to choose them in such a way so that every subset of 100 people from that population is equally likely. There are a few ways to do this. This first one is the one that I recommend. What you do is you take each person in the population and write their name on a piece of paper and put it in a hat. You shake up the hat and you draw out names without replacement. So once you draw a name out, you keep it out until you have the sample size you want. I know that that sounds ridiculous and that we would never do this in real life, but this is kind of the foolproof strategy that works on the AP exam. You are often asked to describe how you would select a simple random sample, and this is how I want you to describe it. Because with any of the other ways, there are too many little details that you have to address in your methodology, whereas this one's really easy. Get however many equal-sized slips of paper, put everybody's name on one of them, put them in a hat, shake up the hat, and draw out names until you have however many you want in your sample. Shaking up the hat, I learned a few years ago, is especially important They had a question like this on the AP exam, and anybody who didn't actually shake up the hat lost points. I think that's ridiculous, but I also think that you deserve to earn all the points on a question like this. So make sure you shake your hat, okay? Other ways to do this are to use a random number generator on your calculator. We haven't done this yet, but the calculator has the ability to select a random digit. You can give it a minimum and a maximum, and it'll give you any number in between those. Or we can use what's called a random digit table, which I'm going to teach you about in just a second. There you go. That's the one we're going to use, and we're going to shake up the hat. All right, the next thing I want to talk about is that random digit table that I just mentioned. So I need you guys to get that passed out as well. Hopefully that's out at the front of the room or on my desk or something like that. So please pause the video and get this random digit table passed out. This is yours to keep. Okay, so Table B, I believe is what it's called. It might be called Table C. I don't remember which one I copied for you. But what it is literally a table of random digits, okay? And in each place, there is a random digit, 0 through 9, and each digit is equally likely to appear. So it's like I got 10 pieces of paper. I put the numbers 0 through 9. That's 10 numbers, right? Each on one piece of paper, and I put them in a hat, and then I drew out a number and I wrote it down, and then I put it back in the hat. And then I drew out a number again, and I wrote it down, and I put it back in the hat, okay? So because each digit is equally likely to appear in each spot, each pair of digits is equally likely, or each set of 3 digits is equally likely. Okay, so what we are going to do, the way we're going to use one of these tables, is that we are going to assign a numerical label to each individual in the population. We're going to use the table to select labels at random. We're going to decide when to stop. I'll stop when I have 10 non-repeating individuals or something like that. And then we go from numbers back to individuals. Now, to be clear, we only do this when we have to, if we're told that we have to use a table. If we're given the option, we're drawing names out of a hat, okay? I have seen on the AP exam where they force you to do it a different way, force you to do it with a table. So that's why I'm teaching you this. A quick example, and then we'll be done with this lesson. It says, say you want to randomly select 5 Freedom High School students out of the population of 3,026 students. Describe how you would do this. So I need to start by giving everybody a number. I'm going to number the students. And I can't call them student 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 3,026 because I have to decide ahead of time how many digits at a time I'm going to look at in the table. So since my population is a 4-digit number, every student is going to have a 4-digit number, and I'm going to take 4 digits at a time out of the table. So the first student is not student 1, they're student 0001. And the second student is number 0002, and that's going to go all the way up to student 3026. Then I'm going to take numbers 4 at a time. And I'm going to ignore repeats because somebody doesn't necessarily get to be in my sample twice. They're not that special. And ignore numbers out of the range. Ignore numbers past 3026. And actually, something else that's not included in here is quadruple 0. So I'm going to ignore quadruple 0 because there's nobody with that number. So then I'm going to go down to my random digit table. Hopefully you're looking at this. Don't use the line 101, 102, 103. That's just, for example, I could say use line 104 to do this. Okay. Let's just start at line 101 though. I'm going to take the first 4 digits, 1922. Okay. Is there a student 1922? Yes, there is. So that counts. I'm going to use that one. 1922 is the first member of my sample. Then I go to my next 4, 3950. Notice I'm still using this 3. The fact that these are grouped in 5s is irrelevant. 3950. Is there a student 3950? No, there is not. That goes beyond 3026. So next I have 3405. Nope, that's too big. 7562. Nope, that's too big. 8713. This is going to take a while. Nope. 9640. Too big. 9125. No, I'm regretting this. 3142. Almost, but no. 5448. No. 2853. That's a good one. So the second member of my sample is student 2853. Okay, and I would keep going, and I would stop when I have 5 valid numbers. Okay? That's how you use these tables. Okay, you decide how many digits at a time you're taking. You label your students. You specify that you're going to ignore repeats and ignore certain numbers, and then you peel off digits, however many at a time, until you have your sample. By the way, we got to the end of a row. We would just continue on the next row with 7367, nope, 6471, nope, okay. But I think we're okay stopping here with just 2 valid numbers. And here is homework assignment number 1 out of your Chapter 5 homework packet.